In this episode, we delve into the heartbreaking and intricate story of a well-respected family man and police officer whose concealed life culminated in a horrific murder in August 2013. This tale uncovers hidden relationships, jealousy, and a fatal clash. Mike McLennan was 42 and had been a police officer in Johnson City, Tennessee, for more than 10 years. He was married to his high school sweetheart, Kellyanne, who was 40, and they had been together for 25 years. To outsiders, their life appeared idyllic. Kellyanne was a dedicated stay-at-home mom, actively participating in church activities. The couple had 2 young children and resided in a suburban neighborhood. Mike was widely regarded as a committed police officer. However, beneath the surface, the situation was much more complex. In late June 2013, Mike arrested 18-year-old Skylar Farber for marijuana possession. Skylar had recently graduated from high school and was working part-time at a local Kroger while getting ready for community college. Skylar was known to be quiet and reserved by his friends, but he had a troubled history with multiple arrests for marijuana use. After his arrest, Skylar's future looked bleak. However, Mike perceived something different in him. Following the arrest, Mike proposed a deal: he would drop the charges if Skylar agreed to meet him privately for sex. Desperate to avoid jail time, Skylar accepted the offer. Their encounters quickly escalated from occasional secret meetings to a full-fledged romantic relationship. This situation left Mike feeling conflicted, grappling with shame and paranoia as he realized that his job, marriage, and reputation were all at stake. As an upstanding officer and family man, Mike struggled with the contrast between his responsibilities and his feelings for Skylar, which made him feel both exhilarated and terrified. Meanwhile, Kellyanne remained completely unaware of Mike's double life. Kellyanne started to notice that their marriage was struggling but couldn't pinpoint the cause, leaving her stressed and feeling helpless. Mike went to great lengths to keep his affair under wraps, crafting false alibis for his absences and using burner phones to contact Skylar. Meanwhile, Skylar also grappled with his own conflicting emotions. While their relationship kept Skylar out of jail, he wasn't emotionally ready for the depth of their connection. Mike's repeated promises to leave his wife and build a life with Skylar never came to fruition, leaving Skylar feeling frustrated and used. The secrecy of their affair was weighing heavily on both men. The power dynamics in their relationship were unmistakable. Mike, as the older, respected authority figure, held significant influence, while Skylar felt compelled to continue the affair due to fear of legal repercussions. This love triangle left all 3 involved feeling trapped in their own ways. Kellyanne was bewildered, Mike was overwhelmed with guilt, and Skylar found himself torn between fear and resentment. None of them could foresee the tragic turn their triangle would soon take. On the morning of August 28, 2013, a hiker named Doug Harper was walking his dog, Jackie Hirschbendler, along a trail near Buffalo Mountain Park in Johnson City, Tennessee. Shortly after 8 a.m., Doug noticed something out of the ordinary. He saw what appeared to be a pile of clothes in a small clearing by the woods. As he approached, he was horrified to discover it was a body. The man lay face down, lifeless, and it was evident he had suffered severe injuries. Doug later recounted feeling an overwhelming sense of panic. He quickly called 911, his voice shaking as he relayed the location to the dispatcher. The body was later identified as 42-year-old Officer Michael McLennan, a prominent figure in the community. Doug, visibly shaken during an interview with local media like WJHL-TV, expressed his disbelief that such a tragedy could occur in their quiet town. Having hiked the trail for years, he never imagined he would encounter something so horrific. "I didn't know what to think," Doug said. "I was just scared and didn't want to touch anything." Within minutes, police officers and paramedics arrived at the scene. The secluded area was quickly cordoned off as investigators began processing the crime scene. Mike's body displayed clear signs of blunt force trauma to the head, and defensive wounds on his arms indicated that he had attempted to fend off his attacker. There was blood on the ground, but not in large quantities, leading investigators to conclude that the murder likely hadn't occurred at that location. It seemed the killer had either attempted to move the body or staged the scene to mislead authorities. The brutal nature of the crime left the community in shock. At first, some speculated it might have been a mugging gone wrong, but the brutality of the attack suggested it was more than a simple robbery. As news of Mike's death spread throughout Johnson City, friends, family, and fellow officers were left reeling. Kellyanne was reportedly inconsolable upon learning of her husband's death. Kellyanne and their 2 children were unaware of what had transpired and now faced the heartbreaking truth. When police arrived at the crime scene on August 28, 2013, it was evident they were dealing with a brutal case. Officer Michael McLennan's body was discovered in a clearing near Buffalo Mountain Park, and the scene was deeply unsettling. Investigators, led by Detective Sarah Watkins Brush and Officer Tom Ridge, quickly began processing the area. Both officers were experienced, but the gruesome details of this case left them disturbed. Mike's body had been severely beaten, with blunt force trauma to the head identified as the likely cause of death. His arms bore deep defensive wounds, indicating he had fought back against his attacker. However, as investigators examined the scene more closely, they discovered something even more disturbing: Mike's genitals were missing. This gruesome detail prompted police to speculate about the killer's motive. Was it a personal attack or a crime of passion? Theories began to circulate. Some investigators suggested that the removal of the genitals was intended to send a message, potentially linked to the Sunshine family and the Society of Zen and Consciousness, new cults that had recently emerged in the area. The scene grew even more complicated when bite marks were found on the body. Initially, investigators entertained the possibility of cannibalism, but forensic analysis quickly pointed to another explanation. The bite marks were likely inflicted by a wild animal, such as a coyote or other scavenger that roamed the wooded area near Buffalo Mountain. Detective Watkins Brush remarked that the bite marks didn't appear to be related to the cause of death, but rather occurred after Mike had been killed. "It's something we're looking into," she told the Johnson City Press, "but we believe these injuries were inflicted post-mortem." While blood was found on the ground near Mike's body, it didn't seem sufficient to indicate that the attack had taken place at that exact location. Investigators employed luminol to search for additional traces of blood, aiming to reconstruct the timeline of events. The absence of immediate signs of a struggle in the surrounding area led police to suspect that the attack either began elsewhere or that Mike had been lured there by someone he knew. As investigators sifted through the scene, the case was rapidly becoming more complex and unsettling than anyone had anticipated. The brutal nature of the crime, combined with the peculiar and symbolic injuries, left police with more questions than answers. Their initial focus turned to Skylar Farber, an 18-year-old recent high school graduate with a troubled past. Skylar was well known in Johnson City, but not for positive reasons. He had battled a marijuana addiction for years, resulting in multiple encounters with the law. Just a few months earlier, he had been arrested by Officer Michael McLennan during a routine traffic stop when a small amount of marijuana was discovered in his car. However, instead of pressing charges, Mike made an offer that would change Skylar's life forever. Mike saw an opportunity to manipulate Skylar for free sex, using his position of power to prey on the vulnerable teen. In exchange for not arresting him, Mike demanded Skylar to have sex with him whenever he wanted. Skylar, who was already struggling to stay afloat, felt trapped. If Skylar didn't comply with Mike's demands, he risked jail time and a shattered future. Mike, who maintained a respected image as a loving husband and father, was adept at concealing his secrets. To everyone else, he appeared to be a model officer. But to Skylar, Mike was someone entirely different: a manipulative, controlling, and increasingly paranoid partner. As their secret relationship continued, Skylar's emotions became more tangled and complex. On one hand, Skylar depended on Mike for protection from legal consequences related to his drug use. On the other, he felt used and repulsed by the situation. Mike's assurances of helping him get clean and start anew always seemed hollow. Skylar, who had dreamed of leaving Tennessee to attend college, watched those aspirations fade away. The pressure of the affair, along with his worsening addiction, left him feeling angry, confused, and desperate. When police brought him in for questioning, they were already aware of his connection to Mike. Detective Sarah Watkins Brush led the interrogation, concentrating on Skylar's turbulent relationship with the officer. Skylar appeared visibly nervous, fidgeting and avoiding eye contact. Initially, he denied any involvement in the murder, but as the pressure mounted, his demeanor shifted. He admitted to the affair but quickly stressed that it wasn't consensual. "He controlled me," Skylar told the detectives. "He had all the power. I was just a plaything for him," Skylar said. As the police pressed further, his responses grew more emotional. He voiced feelings of betrayal and anger, particularly upon discovering that Mike had been involved with other young men. The revelation of Mike's other affairs sent Skylar into a downward spiral, leading investigators to suspect that his anger over being manipulated could have escalated to violence. Kellyanne McLennan, 40, was Mike's wife of 15 years. To everyone in Johnson City, they appeared to be the perfect couple, a devoted mother and wife, alongside a well-respected police officer. But behind closed doors, their marriage had grown increasingly cold in recent years. When police brought Kellyanne in for questioning after Mike's murder, she was still in shock but willing to cooperate. In the interrogation room, Kellyanne began to discuss the widening gap between her and Mike. She described how the man she married had changed over the past few years. He used to be so present, so involved, she told Detective Sarah Watkins Brush. But lately, it felt like he was somewhere else, as if he had built a wall between us. The emotional connection they once shared had faded, and their physical relationship had nearly vanished. She attributed this to the stress of his job, thinking it was something they could work through over time. However, there was something else that had been troubling Kellyanne, something she had discovered in their home. A few months before Mike's murder, she discovered a stash of gay pornography hidden in their son's bedroom closet while he was away at Bible camp for the summer. At first, I didn't want to believe it was his, she said, her voice trembling. I thought maybe it had to do with his job, or that it was some kind of mistake. She chose not to confront Mike, hoping the issue would fade away. But the discovery lingered in her mind, raising questions she couldn't ignore. Could her husband have been hiding something? Then, the police dropped a bombshell that shattered Kellyanne's world. Detective Watkins Brush revealed that Mike had been involved in a sexual relationship with a young man, Skylar Farber, manipulating him after meeting while on duty. Kellyanne's face went pale as the weight of the revelation sank in. She was stunned, struggling to process what she was hearing. The man she thought she knew had been living a double life, deceiving her and their children. Kellyanne broke down in tears, gasping as if she might be sick. I swear on my grandma's Bible, I had no idea, she sobbed. How could he do this? How could he betray us like that? The image of Mike as a devoted husband and father shattered, replaced by the harsh reality of his secret life. She couldn't comprehend how the man she had loved for so long had concealed such dark secrets. Her shock, confusion, and anger were palpable. Kellyanne realized she had been living in the shadow of a lie, and now she was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. As the investigation into Mike McLennan's murder progressed, police uncovered a dark and unexpected twist. While examining Mike's phone records and personal files, investigators discovered a shocking pattern. He had engaged in numerous secret sexual relationships with young men he had arrested while on duty. These weren't typical arrests. Mike had orchestrated these encounters by targeting vulnerable young men, primarily in their late teens or early 20s, often of color, arresting them on inflated charges like marijuana possession or disorderly conduct. After the arrests, he would offer them a way out. He promised to make the charges disappear if they agreed to have sex with him. This revelation was a gut punch to the local police department. Investigators were horrified as the full extent of Mike's predatory behavior came to light. It was a real punch in the stomach, one detective admitted. This guy was wearing the same badge as the rest of us, using it to manipulate and abuse these kids. The discovery raised serious concerns about how many more victims there might be. Mike had been a well-respected officer for years, raising concerns that this behavior could have persisted for a long time. There were fears that other young men, too ashamed or scared to come forward, might still be out there. Compounding the issue was Mike's involvement in community programs like Cops with Kids, an outreach initiative at the local high school designed to build trust between teenagers and law enforcement. Now, police feared that Mike might have used this program to get close to even younger boys, creating a chilling atmosphere of suspicion within the department. Detectives worked tirelessly, but the weight of their discoveries was heavy. The more they dug, the clearer it became how extensive Mike's abuse of power had been. This isn't just about solving a murder anymore, lead investigator Sarah Watkins Brush stated. It's about bringing justice to all the victims whose lives this despicable person manipulated and ruined. The department prepared for the possibility of more victims coming forward, realizing they were facing a much larger case than they had initially anticipated. DeJounte Moore had always been a troubled kid, a former foster child searching for love and acceptance in all the wrong places. When Mike McLennan entered his life, It seemed like he had finally found someone who genuinely cared. Mike had arrested DeJounte for shoplifting at a local 7-Eleven in 2011. Like many others, DeJounte was offered a way out. Mike promised to make the charges disappear in exchange for something much more personal. The relationship quickly turned sexual, but for DeJounte, it wasn't just about the manipulation. He believed that Mike genuinely loved him. When police questioned DeJounte after Mike's murder, he opened up about the depth of their relationship. "No one ever loved me like Mike did," DeJounte told investigators, his voice breaking. "He took care of me and made me feel important. I didn't care about what he made me do because I thought we had something real for 2 years." DeJounte remained in Mike's life, convinced he was special. But in the summer of 2013, DeJounte's world shattered. One late August night, while heading to the 24-hour Walmart on Main Street, he saw Mike's car parked in a dimly lit section of the lot. Curious, DeJounte approached, only to catch Mike in the act, having sex with Skylar. A young man Mike had also manipulated into a relationship. Seeing the two of them together felt like a knife to the heart for DeJounte. He later told police how devastated he was. "I couldn't believe it. I thought I was the only one," DeJounte said, his voice trembling. "It made me sick. I just stood there, watching, and everything I thought was real just crumbled." I felt like a fool. The betrayal was unbearable for DeJounte. He had already been grappling with his own identity and self-worth, and seeing Mike with Skylar made him realize he was just another pawn in Mike's twisted game. DeJounte left the scene without confronting them, too stunned to say anything at that moment. However, the incident planted a seed of anger and resentment in him, which would only grow in the following weeks. The Walmart parking lot encounter became a pivotal moment in the investigation, highlighting just how deeply Mike had manipulated those around him. DeJounte's feelings of betrayal, combined with the evidence of Mike's multiple secret relationships, painted a disturbing picture of a man who preyed on vulnerable young men, leaving a trail of emotional devastation. On the night of August 28, 2013, Skylar Farber confronted Mike McLennan in a secluded clearing near Buffalo Mountain Park. Tensions had been building between them, fueled by jealousy and betrayal. Skylar felt angry and hurt, fed up with Mike's manipulations involving him and numerous other young men. "I just wanted him to feel what I felt," Skylar later told police. As the argument escalated, his emotions spiraled out of control. He later admitted to police that he was high on marijuana, which clouded his judgment and intensified his rage. In a moment of fury, he grabbed a hockey puck he had hidden in his car and struck Mike, who was caught off guard and slightly drunk. "I didn't really want to kill him," Skylar said, his voice shaky. "But it just happened. It felt like I was in a movie, like I was watching someone else do it." Mike fell to the ground, and Skylar was flooded with a mix of fear and adrenaline. Instead of calling for help, he panicked. As he looked at Mike's lifeless body, a dark impulse took over. In an act of extreme rage and desperation, Skylar admitted to the police that he ate parts of Mike's flesh. "I didn't know what I was doing. I was just so angry. I just ate part of him. Actually, he reminded me of undercooked hamburger." He confessed, adding that he also consumed Mike's genitals. This shocking revelation left detectives and investigators in disbelief and queasy. When police arrived at the scene, they found Mike's body in a horrific state. Evidence quickly pointed to Skylar, who had fled but was later apprehended after being spotted nearby. Witnesses described a young man fleeing the scene, and officers quickly made the connection. Skylar was arrested, and as he sat in the interrogation room, the reality of his actions began to sink in. "The weed made me feel like I was in a nightmare," he said, his eyes wide with fear. "I never wanted it to go this far." As the police pieced together the details of the murder, they uncovered Skylar's history with Mike, leading them to suspect him as the killer. What had once brought him joy had devolved into a deadly entanglement, as he was led away in handcuffs. Skylar's regret began to overshadow the anger that had driven him to commit the crime. "I didn't just lose Mike, I lost myself," he said, tears streaming down his face. Skylar's actions shocked the community, leaving them to wonder how love could turn so deadly. His story became a cautionary tale, illuminating the dark side of obsession and betrayal. In March 2015, Skylar Farber stood trial for the brutal murder of Mike McLennan. The courtroom was packed with family and friends of both men, eager to hear the details of the case. Skylar's attorney, James Dukovich, argued that his client was not responsible for his actions due to his heavy marijuana use. Skylar was high when he committed this crime, Dukovic explained to the jury. The marijuana affected his mind and made him psychotic. The defense claimed that Skylar's marijuana use had altered his perception of reality. They presented evidence of his history with the drug, arguing it could lead to temporary insanity. Dukovic brought in psychologist Dr. Ellen Kwok to testify about the effects of marijuana on mental health. She explained that some individuals could experience severe paranoia or hallucinations when under the influence. The prosecution, led by attorney Sarah Jackson, countered this argument by emphasizing that Skylar had been fully aware of his actions during the murder. Jackson highlighted the chilling details of how Skylar had killed Mike and then mutilated his body, eating his flesh and his genitals. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was premeditated and gruesome, she told the jury. Skylar knew exactly what he was doing. As the trial progressed, Skylar experienced a mix of hope and anxiety. The marijuana defense offered him a glimmer of hope. But Skylar knew the evidence against him was overwhelming. When the jury finally delivered their verdict, a heavy silence filled the courtroom. Skylar was found guilty of second-degree murder, a verdict that left him devastated. During sentencing, the judge expressed deep concern over the brutality of the crime and its impact on Mike's family. Skylar was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. As he heard the sentence, tears filled his eyes. He felt a wave of regret wash over him. I never wanted this to happen, he thought. If I could take it back, I would. In the months following the verdict, Skylar struggled to cope with his new reality. He frequently replayed the events of that night, wishing he had made different choices. The tragedy of love turned to loss haunted him daily in prison. As the years passed, the lives of Skylar Farber, Kellyanne McLennan, and DeJounte Moore took very different paths after the tragic events surrounding Mike McLennan's murder. Skylar remained in prison, serving his 25 to life sentence for the brutal crime. He struggled to adjust to life behind bars, confronting the consequences of his actions every day. Skylar spent much of his time reflecting on the decisions that led him to this point. In prison, he enrolled in classes and participated in group therapy, aiming to better himself. Despite the grim surroundings, he expressed a desire to turn his life around and hoped to help others avoid similar mistakes. Meanwhile, Kellyanne found solace in a surprising place. After the tumultuous end to her marriage, she explored her faith more deeply. In January 2016, she officially converted to Catholicism and announced her intention to become a nun, seeking a path of healing and service. This new journey provided her with a sense of purpose and community as she worked to rebuild her life. Kellyanne felt that dedicating her life to serving others would bring her peace and purpose. She joined a convent in her hometown of Lodi, New Jersey, where she focused on helping at-risk youth and the homeless. Her transformation was widely reported in local media, with many praising her decision to turn her life around in such a meaningful way. Through her work, Kellyanne sought to heal not only herself but also the community, finding fulfillment in her new mission. DeJounte relocated to Washington, D.C., where he began advocating for criminal justice reform. He worked with various organizations, focusing on issues like police accountability and the rights of marginalized communities. Driven by his own experiences, DeJounte aimed to raise awareness about the exploitation faced by vulnerable individuals and to push for systemic change. His efforts resonated within the community, highlighting the need for compassion and justice in a broken system. DeJounte shared his story, emphasizing the need for better oversight of law enforcement and the dangers of manipulation within the justice system. His advocacy gained recognition, leading to invitations to speak at events, including a panel discussion on youth and criminal justice at a prominent university. Each of them, Skylar, Kellyanne, and DeJounte, carried the scars of their past, but they channeled their experiences into efforts for healing and change. Despite their differing paths, the impact of their shared trauma lingered, reminding them of the fragility of life and the importance of compassion in a world often marred by abuse of power. Skylar, in his quest for redemption, faced the harsh realities of prison life, grappling with guilt and remorse while striving to better himself through education and therapy. Kellyanne embraced her faith, finding a new mission in service to others, dedicating her life to helping at-risk youth and the homeless. Meanwhile, DeJounte used his experiences to advocate for criminal justice reform, focusing on police accountability and the rights of marginalized communities. Though their paths diverged, each sought healing and purpose in their own way. demonstrating that even in the face of tragedy, hope can emerge. Their stories became intertwined with a broader narrative about resilience, transformation, and the possibility of a brighter future.